Hey, what's up? My name is Tyson Brown and I want to welcome you to Tyson's Fitness Tips podcast. This is Australia's top health and fitness podcast to help you lose weight, look good with your shirt off, feel confident in your body, and finally achieve the goals you want with your health and fitness. So 5 days a week, I'm going to be giving you top information from myself and also from leading experts in the field so you know everything you need to do to get in the best shape of your life. From nutrition to mindset to workout, everything is covered in this podcast and you need to go nowhere else. So like I said, it's going to be 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, in your ears with quick actionable segments that you can implement straight away, because the most important thing is that you can put these things into play. Also, if you listen all the way to the end of the episode, you're going to get 2 special gifts that you can download upon listening to it. So make sure you listen all the way to the end to get those free gifts, okay? So let's get into the episode. Production. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Tyson's Fitness Tips. Now, I'm pretty pumped up today because I've got someone who I've been following for a long time. This guy has spent over 30 years training with weights, training athletes, training people in all different areas of fitness. So not just not just the bodybuilding, not just powerlifting, not specific type of areas. He's more of like a renaissance man. And that's the reason I wanted to bring on Paul today, is because he has so many different facets when it comes to health and fitness. And this is where where people get caught up, because like, oh no, you can only do this or you can only do that. But Paul's kind of, shoved that in the face. He's shown us that you can do other things, and I thought it'd be a really cool topic to talk about today. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me on, brother. I appreciate it.
So, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and, like what your background is? Because I know you've been doing this for 30 years, so kind of what got you into the training side of things?
How I got started in training was when I was about 14 years old. And actually, my home life was kind of messed up at the time, and I had a very troubled youth. Like, I was in trouble, but I had a lot of dramatic things that ended up happening in my life around that time. And I started playing music when I was young, and I decided I was going to go take martial arts out in Oregon. And for people who aren't familiar with United States geography, I was living in Mississippi, which is in the South, and Oregon is just about as far northwest as you can go in the United States. So I'm 14 years old. I take my drum set and I pawn it for things like $400, hop on a Greyhound bus for 4 straight days at 14. And I go out and I spent the summer in Oregon, and my martial arts instructor got me into lifting out there. And when I got there, I was like 98 pounds, and I was like, 5'6" or something. I was a really little dude. And the first time I tried to bench press, I remember I could not bench press the bar. And so it wasn't just that I was a little land weak. Those things tend to go hand in hand, I suppose. So I couldn't even bench press the bar, and I hated lifting. I was so sore every day, and I was doing martial arts in conjunction with it. So I was getting beat on. So you imagine as sore as you've ever been, and people are hitting you for like 6 hours all day in the most sore muscles that you have in your body. It wasn't a good time, and I really hated it. And I hated the lifting and just everything about it. And then one day I was messing around, roughhousing with my martial arts instructor's mother, and I flexed my muscle at her like, hey, don't mess with me. And I actually saw my bicep. And I always make a joke about that. That was the point right then. I'd never seen my bicep before, and I knew right then, I was like, I'm going to lift weights forever. So that was my moment. Like, I think a lot of guys that what I call become lifers, most of the time have a moment where they know. Like, there's I love what this does for me in some way, shape, or form, whether it's just getting stronger or hitting a PR, or how they watch their body transform, that the work, the investment gives you something back out of it that you find meaningful. And it turns out to be some type of healthy coping mechanism in your life or whatever. Because most of the time and I think it's for everybody, for men, we kind of have that rite of passage or the pecking order that we kind of deal with. And getting into the weight room often serves as some type of exterior shield that we build up around to kind of protect those insecurities that we're dealing with at the time in our life. And we all go through those things. There's, it's just a lot of guys don't like to admit that kind of stuff, but we all have those things. And lifting offers a way to kind of put something up and make us feel protected, kind of hide behind for a while. And for me, it certainly did at that time. So that's how I got into lifting. And like I said, literally, I knew from the point I saw my biceps, I was going to lift weights forever. And that never went away.
It's so funny you say that because like when I first, it was the same thing for me. Like when I first started lifting, when I could finally just like tense your bicep and you can touch, you're like, oh, it's hard. Like, oh, there's something there.
There's something about it. It was that last article that T Nation ran by me. It was it was like just basic arm training, like something still about like picking up a barbell and just curling it and your biceps. Right, it's always there. Like little kids, you ask them to show me your muscle. They instinctively know to flex their bicep. Right.
That's so true.
Like everybody knows that, right? So, yeah, I mean that was my moment, and just watching my body develop like over the years, it was such a great thing because the harder I trained, the faster my development came. And that'll probably lead into some of the stuff we're going to talk about, later that you wanted to cover as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so like going from you training yourself, what made you want to start training other people like in a different area? Like how did you kind of get into that side of things?
That's kind of a misconception. I do coach people online, and I coach a myriad of different types of people, from competitors to athletes, from wrestlers or jiu-jitsu guys to literally IFBB pros I work with or NPC competitors or whatever. But I really had only a very short span in my life where I trained people in person. I've never been like a personal trainer. Right. I was a computer engineer for 15 years actually. Huh. As an adult, as a grown up, I was a computer engineer.
Okay, cool. And then so you kind of found yourself into the online training side of things then, I guess, like instead of training people in person, like that's where you've started to, I don't know, like teach people, I guess.
When I started writing, and I had websites coming to me wanting me to write for them, as I got more visibility within the industry, then people started asking me to come teach. So it was a case where I'd spent at that time, more than 20 years reading everything there was to read on training, and then developing my own principles and that kind of stuff, and then I was competing in powerlifting at the time too. So at that time when I was going out and teaching and doing seminars, really for a few years a lot, and at that time it was mostly centered around strength development. So I didn't really do the training in-person thing. So like when a lot of guys ask me, like when they asked me about, the kind of the personal training thing, that was never really my forte. I didn't do a lot of that, but I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people, like in person and through online and stuff. So I guess I consider myself more a coach now than I ever have, like a personal trainer. Nothing wrong with personal. I tell guys a lot of times, if you want to cut your teeth and this is really what you want to do, personal training is a great way to start by getting in there and actually working with people, because there's a lot of science, but there's so much of this that's art too, and getting to know people. Tibbs and I talk a lot about the neurotyping stuff, actually finding out what people gravitate towards, what resonates with them in terms of training and stuff like that. And there's a lot of hands-on stuff that you have to have with people that are going to transcend past anything you're going to ever read in a study. You work with 500 people, all 500 people are going to have different things that they're going to enjoy doing, that they're going to hate, and that kind of stuff. And so that hands-on experience is invaluable.
Absolutely. I think it's funny you say that because, we try and stay up on the latest research and we're always looking at things, but like you said, research is only one side of the things. Like having that application and knowing whether a client's going to respond to it or not, or whether you're going to respond to it or not, and having that real world application is so important too.
Yeah, research and science, it's kind of weird that we call it science because it's really more like a guideline. Some of the stuff I think, you can, this is pretty black and white, but there's a lot of gray areas in there. And I've always thought of research as coming out. Number one, you got to really dig in and actually read what the flaws in any particular study are. And the second thing is just understanding, even when it's a really well done study, it's still just a guideline. It's a guideline for kind of a general person, but it's not something that's truly factual. Like it's factual to an extent, but you take a training program that works for, even if you have 12 subjects, there'll be variations within all 12, and they're usually pretty close, but there'll be sometimes some statistical variations that are significant. But at the same time, if nobody outside of the rest of the population would stick to doing that training program for whatever 12 weeks or 8 weeks, however long the study runs, then it's who cares, right? It's just at that point, it's just information that you can just look at, oh, okay, that's cool. But if the average guy that really wants to go in and get bigger, stronger, whatever, if this is something he's not going to do on a continuing basis and it's not sustainable, then it's, what's the point?
Yeah, there's no point having an optimal program if you're not actually going to follow that optimal program.
It's kind of worthless.
Exactly. So, Paul, speaking on different areas you've kind of looked at, because I know, we've talked about how there's strength training, there's bodybuilding, there's endurance training, there's all those things, and you've seemed to have, a lot of people say you can't, you can't be a really good runner and also have good strength, or you can't look really good being a powerlifter, although that has changed over time. But how did you start experimenting with these things to actually find out how to integrate this stuff together into your own training?
When I started out, I've gone through multiple transitions of what I was focusing on in training over the course of 30 years. I would expect most people to. So when I started, bodybuilding was my thing. When I started, I was a huge Dorian Yates fan. I was a big Mike Mincer fan. I know most people loved Arnold, but I was a massive Dorian Yates fan. So I really loved that Dorian was like this. He was a thinker. He was he applied the things he knew. Were kind of like we just talked about. That he felt like kind of resonated with him and how he wanted to train. And I loved how Dorian, I loved his physique and I loved how he trained and his intensity, his mindset and approach to everything. And so that really resonated with me. So probably the first, I don't know how many years of my training, I was really kind of lucky in a way, because back then you just had magazines. So you read a magazine, you had some principles in front of you, and it was your job to go into the gym and actually execute. Whereas today, somebody reads something and then they're going to read another training principle the next day, and then the next day, and then they're going to ask 400 questions. And I think guys are so confused online now that, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, so we'll get back to that. So I started off in bodybuilding. And I really stuck to a core set of principles for a very, 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 very long time. I'm talking 12, 15 years of my training. Didn't deviate a whole lot from just those core principles. It was progressive overload. It was adding weight, adding reps. It was a select number of movements and getting really efficient at those movements. And I didn't have this wide array of a million different training styles. I mean, I did some different things. I probably tried some different programs. I did everything from cybergenics. A lot of guys probably don't even remember what the hell that was. But I did cybergenics. I did Bulgarian power burst training. I did a whole bunch of things that would come along, for 8 weeks here and there at a time. But for the most part, over 12, 15 years of my training, it was really based in some the building the foundation and those core principles of just. People ask me all the time, well, how would you approach adding, getting stronger or whatever? I'm like, listen, for I don't know how, probably the first 10 years of my training, it was this simple. I would pick a weight that I could do 10 reps with it. And I would try to get 12, until I could hit. And when I could get 12 reps with it, I would up the weight. And I'd pick a heavier weight that I could get 8, 9, 10 reps with. And then I would start shooting for 12. That was it. That's all I did for 10 years. It was that simple. And then guys wonder, they're I was totally natural for 20 years. Well, when I started training, I was 98 pounds. By the time, that was at 14. By the time that I was 18, I was 220. Whew. So there was a lot of power shoveling as far as food goes. And it was just really, dude, I just trained really freaking hard. I've had so many people come out over the years that train with me, and this is not brag. I don't train anywhere near as hard now as I used to because I'm not competing in anything anymore, but I still train hard.
Yep.
But just my training style now, I get people come out and want to train with me, and they just get destroyed, and they're like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to be training this hard. I'm like, I don't even train that hard anymore. For me, this is just normal training. But during my first probably 10, 12, 15 years, dude, I was killing it. Balls to the walls every session, 4 strip sets, drop sets. It was all sleeping, eating, training, just anything you could pour into a session to make it as brutal as possible. And my body grew, right? Your form, your function becomes your form. So whatever you're asking your body to do, it's like, and it's having to adapt over and over again. Well, if you're giving it, the only way out is like, okay, I'm going to have to grow. Like, you're not giving it any way out other than just to get bigger, get stronger. And that was what I did. So, I mean, that was my core training principles for, 12, 15 years. And there was only small deviations. When I went into powerlifting, I kind of had to rearrange things, right? Like, so I had to get the whole theory of training the way I've been training for those previous probably 15 years. Training for strength is very different than training purely for muscle growth. And that's why when I ask guys, and I actually did that yesterday for a poll on my IG, is like, you want to read more about, getting strong, growing muscle or getting stronger. A lot of guys, they have this misconception that you can do both. You can get maximally strong and like grow maximally at the same time, and it doesn't really work that way. They're two very different modalities. So when I transitioned over to powerlifting, I had to really kind of learn, like starting from day one all over again, and I had to retrain myself like out of the way that I used to train. And powerlifting training is so easy compared to really training like for the way that I was training before. Like, I had to really dial the intensity back and learn about training to be more explosive, moving the bar with speed, learning where my muscular weak points were, how to actually learn how to do that. So it's really like they're apples and monkey wrenches. Like, the only thing I've ever thought that powerlifting and bodybuilding truly had in common was that there was barbells and dumbbells in both of them.
Man, what a journey you've been on. That is fucking awesome. And I think doing it at 14 years old was like the perfect time, because obviously you're growing, number one, you get to shovel food in, and like you said, you ingrain those habits over the years. So now what feels like it's hard to other people, it's not hard to you, because you build up that foundation, and then you've kind of you've transitioned over time. You've had to learn other things, but having that foundation first and just building it up, and just it's execution of the basics, and it's mastering the monotonous is what gets people success. Like, everyone's like, oh, we've heard about, oh, I've got to shock the muscles, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. It's like, you want to shock your muscles? Like, add a couple extra reps, or add some extra weight. You don't need to do a lot. Like, you don't need to completely overhaul your program every couple of weeks. And all, like, there's just so much misconception out there, and I think you've really just hit it home. Build up the foundation.
Well, and the other thing for beginners, because I want to be clear about that, and I've always told this to guys, after about your first 5 to 7 years, if you're not starting as young as I was, if you're a little older, but after about 7 years of hard, intelligent training and sound nutrition, you're pretty maxed out as a natural guy. Like, you're not going to be growing at some exponential clip after 5 to 7 years. You're pretty much going to have maxed out your genetic capabilities at that point. So it's kind of important, actually, your first few years to really milk that basic progressive overload principle for as long as possible, and not start throwing in stuff like supersets, drop sets, giant sets, rest pause, force reps. Like, I did that, probably started doing those things after maybe 3 or 4 years. But up till that point, it was just all straight sets. Because once you start, and think about it this way, once you start throwing in those principles, those kind of advanced technique principles, drop sets, strip sets, whatever you're doing, your body is going to adapt to those principles. So if you're a new guy, you've got so much potential just adding weight and reps. Like, right, there's just so much you can milk out of that. There's 4 years that you can milk out of just adding more reps or adding more weight. So once you start including those principles, your body's going to adapt to that. It's going to understand, okay, here's that stimulus. I know how to adapt. So yeah, it'll grow. But if you throw that in really early, what are you going to throw in after those 4 years or 5 years? I was really lucky. I look back now and realize I was really lucky, because I had magazines, and here's a program in a magazine. Now I just got to go in the gym and actually do the program. I didn't get to ask a million questions. I just had to do it. So I was pretty lucky that, with the books that I was reading, and the magazines I was reading, and the stuff I was going by, it really kept me on a pretty good path for the first 5, 7, 10 years. Yeah,
and like you said, you don't need to throw in all that extra stuff until you've actually started mastering those like just getting the basics down. Like, you don't need all that shiny, pretty stuff. But
if you can't perform an efficient squat, you probably shouldn't be doing drop sets on the leg extension.
That's for sure. And in regards to that, though, so if we talk about, you said people who have just started off, they have a good genetic potential of 5 to 7 years. What about, like, what if someone's listening to this and they've been fucking around for a couple of years? Like, let's say they've just kind of, you know, they've just gone in, done whatever for, like, let's say the last 3 or 4 years, and then maybe just tuned in this podcast. Like, should they be taking the same approach of what you just recommended? Should they go back to the basics and start working their way up? Like, or have they kind of already missed their, let's say, window of opportunity?
No, I don't think so. Because here's the thing: if they've been messing around and they don't understand what real training intensity is like, then they still got, they still have that ceiling they haven't really, bumped up against yet, right? Because if you're just going in and you're not training that hard, your body's only, it's going to respond to the degree of stimulus that you're asking it to, right? So if, let's say you've been messing around, jacking around in the gym for 3 or 4 years, you had a little progress, but you don't really understand what brutally hard training is. It's the same. You still have that room left to use it, right? So you bring it in. Like you've been going in, doing some casual stuff. You think you're working hard. But now somebody takes you in and takes you to a true set to failure on, say, leg press. And you've never done that before. It's just a straight set to basically failure. Maybe you could do one more rep, but you've never been getting close to that kind of like effort or intensity. Well, you're going to grow from just that. So you're really still kind of not that far past those, if a noob goes in and he's training really casual for a couple of years, he's going to see some progress, of course, because he's a noob. Until somebody takes him in and helps him to understand what real hard training intensity looks like, he's not going to make the kind of progress that, he thinks he should be. And I think that's the root of so many guys' frustration as to why is it this won't grow or that won't grow. And I understand movement execution is important and all that kind of stuff, but there's something to be said for just slapping some weight on the bar, adding more reps over time, and then performing some brutally hard all-out sets with good form. That's really just kind of everything. But nobody wants to hear that, right? Because it's so simple, and everybody believes there's some secret. There just really isn't.
That's so true. And I think another thing on that level too, it's like everyone thinks they can, you see, you look at Dorian Yates, you look at the guys in the magazine, and it's like, there's also that, like, if you push your body to your limits and you're trying to, like, get the most out of your body, you've still got to accept that there is that genetic potential too, like you might not look as good as what people look like on the magazine, and people still don't understand. I think there's that's why they're constantly searching too, like, oh, my arms don't look as big as that, maybe I'm not doing this properly, I'm not doing that, but it's like, there could actually just be that genetic potential too. Do you agree?
No, that's everything, dude. Shelby Starnes had made a comment a couple of weeks ago in one of the forums we were in together, and some guy said something about a muscle not growing, or he goes, do you think it's I can't remember what the guy said, but Shelby said, your whole body's like that. And the context of it was hilarious. Your whole body's like that. So basically, yeah, it's like a guy will look at a guy's arms. I learned this lesson pretty early on, to be honest. I'll give you an example of kind of what you're talking about. I don't know do you remember the bodybuilder Vince Taylor?
Yes, I've heard of Vince Taylor.
Okay, so Vince Taylor had amazing calves and arms. His arms were awesome, dude. Like, Vince Taylor had the most amazing arms. But I kind of knew instinctively early on that, because the magazines, they're really, really famous, known for, if a guy's got an amazing body part, they run articles about how he trains it. But I kind of instinctively knew early on about the whole genetic factor. And I can remember, I remember reading this one about how Vince Taylor built his 21-inch arms. And early in the article, he says that his arms were 18 inches when he started training. I'm like, well, then this dude has nothing to offer me, right? He's got nothing he's going to tell me that's going to help me, like I'm a twig and I want to grow big arms. Like, he was doing like 1 million cable exercises for lightweight, and it was literally like 20 and 30 reps per set. I'm like, this isn't, instinctively, I know this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. But there are guys that still read that and they don't have that intuition that, or just kind of even the basic concept. Look, this dude had 18-inch arms before he ever picked up a weight. He's not really going to have, more than likely, a lot to offer me. My arms are 9 inches, or 8 inches. I have asparagus arms. You could dress my arms up as thermometers. So the point is that I instinctively knew early on, like, the guys that I needed to learn from were the guys that struggled. Whatever, because Arnold talked about, struggling to bring his calves up. but I wanted to find stuff, and I did the same thing with powerlifting. One of the guys I'm friends with now, Kirk Kowalski, Captain Kirk.
Captain Kirk.
Captain Kirk. He struggled to build a big deadlift, right? But he still pulled. He pulled, I think, 800 for a double in the gym, but he never pulled 800 in competition. But he got close. He pulled 777, I believe. But that's the guy you want to learn deadlifting from, not these guys that are pulling like 900 that were pulling like 700 when they were 18 years old. That's not the guy I want to learn about. Like, and I eventually pulled 725, which the deadlift was my worst lift forever. But I learned so much from guys who struggled to build a good deadlift, but eventually did. Those were the guys I learned from. I didn't want the guy that squatted like 1,000 pounds. Like first time I met Kirk, I was like, well, no wonder you squatted 1,000 pounds. You're 4'3", right? And you got like your femurs are like this like long, 4 inches long. Yeah, like of course you squatted 1,000 pounds easily. But Kirk had the tiniest hands I've ever shaken in my life. Well, I remember shaking his hand, and I had pretty big hands, and my hand just like swallowed his hand. Right? You ever see that movie, Scary Movie 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Strong
take
hands.
my little hand. Yeah, he had two little hands. Like that was what he reminded me of. Like he was the guy at Thanksgiving, like with the hands in the turkey base. Right? Yeah, that was Kirk. Kirk had the tiniest little hands, right? So he had trouble gripping the bar. He'd always tell me, he's like, if I could hit my grip just right, he's like, I'd be good. But he also had to learn other things, like how to drop his hips to actually get his legs. Like he had like super powerful legs and hips, right? Of course he did. But he had to learn how to get that stretch reflex out of the bottom of his deadlift to engage his quads more to get that speed off the floor. And I learned that from him, but I also learned how to make that work for me personally. So I didn't have a grip problem, but there was a lot of things that Kirk learned about training the deadlift that I learned that I carried over into my own training. But there were other guys I learned that actually did have good lifts, like Andy Bolton. You know who Andy Bolton is.
Yep.
And, Andy, like he's had health problems and stuff. But Andy was one of my favorite powerlifters for a long time because he was so technically proficient at everything he did. And I learned a lot about smart deadlifting from Andy. It was when I started putting all these things together, but figuring out, which is kind of like the Bruce Lee thing, right? Like absorb what is useful and discard what's not. Yep. And that's a lot of what I feel like that I was pretty good at doing. So it's kind of taking all these different principles. And I didn't ask guys like, can I do this, whatever. I just did it. I just went in and practiced. And I think that's also a kind of a lost art with a lot of guys these days. They ask if it's okay. And I never had to ask them, like, it's my gym time. It's my body. I'm going to do what I want to do. So if I learn something, I want to go in and apply it and see if I like it or see if I can make it work for me or if I see I needed to tweak it or whatever. So I did a lot of that, and that's a lot of how you learn as well.
Yeah, apply, like I said, trialing different things, but making sure, discarding what is not useful. If it doesn't work for you, don't be afraid to get rid of it either.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no reason to go into, and that was the other thing. I've always tried to consistently develop my own training principles, styles as I was transitioning and whatever. And like I said, I would take other principles I knew guys had used, but if they didn't apply to me personally, or if I didn't just even like them, we talked about that earlier. Like if you just don't like doing something, you're not going to be very good at it because you're not going to do it very often, and then you won't get very good at it. So if I didn't like something, I didn't do it very often. But I was pretty good at figuring out what did work for me and what didn't. I was pretty good at getting rid of.
That's very cool. And just having that intuition, you're not going to know straight away whether something's good or not good for you. You obviously have to apply it and give it some time to actually give you some feedback, which is another thing that I think people just get too impatient. But you've got to have that time to have that feedback and say, okay, is this actually, are the measurements that I'm tracking from doing this, is this giving me a positive outcome or is it giving me a negative outcome?
Dude, absolutely. One of the training protocols I used consistently for 2 straight years, didn't deviate from the biggest muscle growth spurt I had. I'm kind of contradicting myself here because I actually had another muscle growth spurt, and it was I would have been in my 30s actually at that point. And it was when dog crap training or DT training came around. I don't know if you remember dog crap training. And dog crap training was even more brutal than all the training I'd been doing before that, which, of course, when I read about that, and I was like, this is really hard, brutalistic training style. And I was like, okay, well, sign me up for that. So, it was low volume, but using a lot of set extending intensity methods, which I liked. So, like, it really spoke to my training soul. And so I went in, I started incorporating all the principles Dante had laid out for dog crap stuff. And Dante's kind of a everyday man's genius when it comes to like training modalities and principles and stuff. So I had but I was doing a lot of eating, and every time I can ever think in my training life where I had a growth spurt, a muscle, like where I was growing, I was eating a ton of food. And that's often the other missing, part for most guys. They don't ever really learn how to eat either.
When it comes to like the diet side of things, I think it's really important because there are those people, like you said, who don't obviously eat enough. Like they eat like they literally eat like birds, and they're like, oh, I don't know why I'm not growing. But then there's also those people who kind of take it to the extreme that I've seen certain people. Not this is not a majority of the people, but they're like, oh, I've just got to eat everything I can, and you see them blow up like a balloon. So, is there any way you do you personally recommend people they track their calories, or like how do you kind of go about that? How have you been teaching people over the years?
So that's pretty simple, really. Is that the hardest one? Eating a whole lot of food to grow. That's pretty simple. You just got to eat more food. And I get guys ask questions and stuff like, "How do I get more protein in?" I'm like, "You eat." Like that's a really simple question to answer. Like, why are you even asking it? Like that was like so straightforward. It's like, how do I get my socks on? I don't know how to answer you. How to get more protein? You eat more. I don't know what there's a trick here that you're, this is a trick question. But for guys dieting, serious. How do I get in my car? You open the door, dude? I don't know what you're asking me. How do I eat more protein? Another chicken breast?
And I find like it's people like somehow they go out of their way to not consume enough protein. It's like, I didn't get enough protein today. It's like, you've got so many different options there. You've got shakes. You've got everything. Like, how are you not actually getting enough protein?
Yeah, that's the easiest one. Like, add another scoop to your shake. This is not hard. But for guys, the hardest one for sure across the entire fitness spectrum will be fat loss, right?
Yep.
So what I suggest to most guys is that they understand you've got to be there's no magic. And I've got an article coming out about this where we talk about there's no magic. There's no, it's your insulin's not keeping you fatter. There's no hormone that's making you fat. There's no special diet. There's no food selection per se. You've got to be in a caloric deficit to start with. Like that is like number one. Like, even if you're eating all of the quote-unquote healthiest, quote-unquote clean foods or whatever, and people get in their panties in a bunch when you say clean foods, and then you got all the evidence-based crowd that gets up in arms, and that shit drives me nuts. When we say clean food, we know what we're talking about. Mostly, basically, whole food sources that are highly unprocessed, okay? So you have to understand, it's going to start, you got to be in a caloric deficit, regardless of what dieting style that you choose. If you're going to lose fat, you got to be in a caloric deficit. But the other part is, I believe, like, if you're going to lose fat, your food choice does matter. That's what I go into, because food is your energy, right? So if your energy source sucks, which would be your food sources, if they suck, then your actual energy contained within that system is going to suck too. So you're not. So whatever it is you eat, there is a hormonal response, and your hormonal response is going to drive how you feel, your hunger levels. So if you can't control your hunger, you're going to have trouble sticking to a diet. Satiation is kind of important. But getting back to the number crunching is that you got to understand, you got to be in caloric deficit. And what I usually tell people start out to keep things simple is body weight times 15. And people go, I'm going to gain a bunch of weight. I'll know I gained a bunch of weight eating that. I'm like, well, if you go and actually sit down and track how much you're eating, people are usually freaked out by how off they are. They really are. Yeah. They think they're eating X amount, but I'm like, do you weigh everything you eat? And here's the thing. That's very monotonous, but I suggest to everyone to spend 6 to 9 months weighing all your food. And this is why, because after 6 to 9 months, and I mean 6 to 9 months of everything you eat is weighed, you look at it, you'll get to where you can eyeball it really well.
Yep.
But if you I spent 2 years weighing all my food. Now, like, I just like, that's 8 ounces of this. That's 1 cup of that. Like, I don't need to weigh anything, but I spent 2 years weighing every single thing. And I kept weighing it even after I could eyeball it to kind of cement that in. So I can look and be like, that's 5 ounces, that's 8 ounces. And I'd like spot on pretty much every time. So I suggest guys really weigh your food. Really, like, sit down, and if you're going to take this serious and you want to get serious about your fat loss, then you've actually got to spend some real time weighing your food, figuring out how many calories that you got to have coming in, and just stay consistent. And guys try to get so confusing. Should I eat less on this day? Or when it's like, just stay the same caloric level for 2 weeks. Okay, weigh all your food and see what your weight does. Just the same calories coming in each day, the same amount, because your activity is not the same every day. You're basically what we think of as your NEAT, right? Your non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, like the stuff that you're doing outside the gym and just in everyday life. That's going to be different every day. So I always just have guys do the same caloric intake, trying to figure out where you're at from a maintenance standpoint. Once you figure out your maintenance standpoint, lower your calories each day by anywhere from 300 to 500, all depending either how fat you are or, how whatever, like, there's personal factors in there. But generally 300 to 500 calories a day, you lower from there. Once you figure out what your maintenance level is. It's really that simple. Protein is always 1 gram per pound of body weight, kind of the floor. The longer you start diet, the longer you've been dieting, the lower calories go, you increase your protein. But protein should never go down. And then carb and fat intake's pretty easy. I mean, those are your 2 variables, right, that you're going to manipulate to achieve fat loss. So really simple, body weight times 15 to start. Protein is 1 gram per pound of body weight. Then you're going to do anywhere from 20 to 30% of your calories will come from fats, and whatever's left over is going to go into carbs. And that's a really simple formula. Now, if you want to do keto, it's very different, or if you do some of it, if you do in zone, it's going to look very different, or whatever. But the point is, all these named diets, the ones that work, when you equate protein and calories, they all work about exactly the same, as long as you're in a caloric or energy deficit. It's really that simple.
Yep, and it's just like the training, like I said before, like you can look at, you hear carb backloading, you hear about, there's keto, there's all those type of things too, but it's like, look, man, like stay in a calorie deficit. You don't need to alternate your days or anything like that. You keep your protein high, and because the more confusion you add into your dieting system, like the harder it's going to be to stick to. And
yeah, now I've got it even simpler than that, depending on what I want to do. Like if I'm really trying to get super lean, I just have carbs during training, 1 meal post training, and the rest of the time it's protein and vegetables. It's brutal. It's brutal, but it works really fast.
Yep.
But it's not what I consider to be 100% sustainable for me all the time, because I like eating other types of foods. So if I'm actually doing a show or getting ready for a show or whatever, I actually eat carbs pretty much every meal. But once again, I go back to macro counting. And some people might think that's boring, but if you're trying to be exact and get shredded, man, you got to be exact.
Yep. And that's also the thing, I think, like when you kind of said this like before, like if you want to take your fat loss seriously, you have to do this consistently for at least, 8 to 12 weeks of like hard, consistent effort. And you can't be like, I'm going to be good during the week and then maybe I'll have 1 or 2 drinks. It's like, no, you need to know you're in a calorie deficit. So you need to commit to this for the next 12, 16, whatever it's going to be, and just fucking go at it.
I remember seeing a stat a while back. It's like generally on the weekends, we tend to consume about 20 to 30% more calories each day of the weekend than we consume during the weekday. So think about it this way. You go on a couple of binges on the weekend, your 5 days of strict dieting is pretty much knocked right out of the boat, right? It's pretty much, you killed it over the course of, Now, I could kill a diet in a couple of hours.
Me too.
For a month. Yeah, I can eat. Like, I can really eat. But the thing is you're right. It's like you have to be, the reason why a lot of guys are like, man, I'm not making progress like I want to, is they're just not strict for long enough periods of time. Yep. It's really that simple. They all think there's some magic. There's really not anything magical, man. You just got to be super consistent for long periods at a time. So when I get guys ask me stuff like, how do I get like as big as you, or how did you hit these numbers, or like how did I get this developed? I'm like, I've been training 30 freaking years. Think about it, 30 years, dude. You're like 22 years old. I've been training longer than you've been alive.
That's so true.
And then some guys can't stay on a diet for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Like if you can't do a diet for 8 weeks, You know, like if you need to sit back and reevaluate your discipline, like, or how bad you actually really want to do this. You know what I mean? But like, so many guys toy around in what I call mediocre land because they just don't have the discipline to put in that kind of work for a long periods at a time. They want the end result, right? Everybody wants the end result. Like, everybody wants to be jacked, huge, shredded, strong, all that kind of stuff. But there's always for the average guy, not the elite or the outliers, it's a long road.
Yeah.
So you got to be willing to bear down for long periods of time. Just be super consistent with what you're doing. It's a lot of bricklaying. Sometimes, like, even with me, like, for the years, like, I haven't always enjoyed training. And sometimes you just put it on autopilot, man. You just go in and get the work done. Or when you're getting ready for a show, it's just another meal of chicken and rice, bro. And you just down it, and you're starving. And then, you got another session of cardio. And it's monotonous. And it's all for, like, whatever, 3 minutes or 7 minutes that you're going to be on stage. So you got to decide if that's worth it to you.
Yep.
Right? Is the juice worth the squeeze? That's what you got to figure out about everything in life, right? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
It's so funny you say that, because I actually went, I was prepping for a photo shoot, which I just had on the weekend, and my clients were like, is it really worth the 20 photos you took? And I was like, yeah, it was actually. Like, they're like, that was a hard effort. I was like, yeah, but I was happy with the outcome, so it was worth it. Like, it was worth the squeeze for me in that point.
Like, when you break it down, it's not even about the 20 photos, right? It's about seeing a process through.
Yeah.
That's what it really comes back to. Because if you'd have shown up that day and he took one picture and you were happy with that one picture, to you, it was worth whatever the effort you put in, because it's about going through the process.
So true.
That's what most guys don't fall in love with, that process. You got to learn how to fall in love with the process. Look, man, you're going to spend more time. Here you are. You're at point A right now. Okay, and you want to be at point B. And you think when you get to point B, you're going to be happy. But the truth is, when you got your photos taken, you're only in that shape for a day or two, right? But you're going to spend a whole bunch of time in that in-between space from point A to point B. You got to learn how to love that space. You got to learn how to really love that space that exists in between those points. Because as A is closing down on B, that's where you're living.
Yep.
And here, B is very fleeting. And then it happens, it goes away. I learned that too. It's called arrival fallacy if you look it up. It's a psychological effect where you believe that the attainment of something in your life is going to give you this unrelenting joy, right? And it never, ever, ever, ever works that way. I remember the first dude I worked forever to finally hit a 700 deadlift. And the first time I hit it, I pulled 705 for a double. And I was elated, like, that I finally smashed a 700 deadlift for about a day. But I worked my ass off for I don't know how long to hit that. I was literally happy. I remember like the next day being like, man, that's really not that great. But I worked so hard. To finally break 700. And then it happened, and I was really happy for a day. And I was like, man, but there's people out there like pulling my shit for reps on the daily, right? Like, and then you lose that joy from comparison. That was something I T-Nation had just posted an article that I wrote about that. It was like, comparison is the thief of joy. But the point is like learning how to live in those in-between spaces and finding joy there. It's not about the destination. It really isn't. Aerosmith said that in a song. You know, life's a journey, not a destination. And you got to learn how to love that journey. And when you start to love the journey, you don't even really know it. And then you wake up one day and you're like, you look pretty good, you're pretty strong, whatever. Have you ever had this happen? Have you ever seen pictures of yourself during your time where you thought you didn't look that great, and then you see them 2 years later, and you're like, man, I look pretty good then. Like, but you're totally not self-aware enough to realize you're just not living in the moment.
Yeah.
I have a great story about that. Quite a few years ago, I was in the gym, and this friend of mine named Roger was getting ready to go on vacation. And every week I see him in the gym, he looked better every week. He was like a week out, and he was shredded just for vacation. I was like, dude, you look awesome. He's like, I looked okay. I'm like, no, dude, I'm telling you, you are jacked as hell right now. Like, had veins all over his striations. I mean, he was probably ready he could have stepped on stage. And I mean, he looked amazing. So he was just going on vacation. So he just went on vacation. So literally like 5 years after this, I was talking to him one day because he and I, he was one of the fight instructors where I did fighting at the time. We were talking one day. And he goes, hey, man, he goes, you remember a couple of years ago when I was getting ready to go on vacation and I like dieted for like 3 months or whatever? I was like, yeah. He goes, I saw the pictures from that vacation like the other day. He goes, dude, I looked awesome then. I'm like, I told you that then. And you were like, yeah, I just look okay. He's like, no, dude, I was shredded. I was like, yeah, I said that then. But in the moment, he totally thought he just looked okay. And I've done that a million times. It's a really weird thing, like what you think you're waking up to every day. And now the crazy thing is when I was a total fat ass, I thought I looked awesome and sexy. And now I've gone back and seen those pictures. It's like, why would I ever take a picture of myself with my shirt off when I look like that? That is embarrassing. How am I living my life?
Oh man, it's a perspective. It's what they say, hindsight's 20/20. Is that what they say?
I think, hindsight's 20/20. I think present sight's really, really skewed.
It's so funny that you say that, like, you know, having to, like, that process, like, you know, it's going to be boring, it's going to be monotonous, but, like, that's where you just got to be like, yep, I'm just doing the thing over and over again because I know that I will eventually get to that outcome. But like you said, the outcome is never the answer either. It's like we get joy in that process of working towards something. And when you achieve it, like, right, you may feel good for a day or a week or whatever it is, but then you've got to set something else. Because if you don't have anything to strive for after that, then you can just fall back into bad habits.
Yeah, and you know, one thing I like to point out to guys too is like one of the constants that we see that people find motivation is for example when they see guys in movies, right? Like when they see The Rock in a movie, or you see Chris Hemsworth, as Thor, you see some of these guys that undergo transformations for movies. Well, if you actually spend some time to get into that, those guys might have spent 5 months, 7 months, 8 months getting ready for that role. And you think about it, like those guys hired trainers, they were strict on their nutrition for 5, 7, 9 months. Like The Rock stayed in pretty good shape year round, but we'll spend often 6 months getting ready for a movie role to look a specific way. So you're a dude, you're Mr. Chubby Boy, and you're like 22% body fat, and you're like, hey, I want to be shredded and look whatever. I'm like, well then, one of my sayings is like, if you walk 10 miles deep into the woods, you got to walk 10 miles to get back out. So if you spent the last 8 years eating yourself into a rotund fat ass like I did when I was powerlifting, don't expect it all to come off in some 8-week period. Like you're going to have to, it's going to be a long walk back out. It took me about 2 years going from where I was like about 290 when I quote unquote retired for powerlifting. I was telling my girlfriend that tonight, like, she was saying something like, whenever we go into the gym, she's like, every dude like just stares at you the whole time. I'm like, that's really funny because I'm really tiny now. She's like, you're not tiny. She didn't know me when I was 290 pounds. I'm like 240. So like even my kids, because my kids are like, Dad, it's so weird because you're so skinny and little. I'm like, I know. And she thinks that's funny. Right? Like, she's like, what are they talking about? I'm like, because they were used to seeing me at 280 to 290 pounds. And I was like, I was an absolute mountain then. But it took me about 2 years to come down from 290, 280 to hitting, I think it was I stepped on stage at 225. When I stepped on stage, I was 225 pounds. So that took about 2 years.
Whoa.
So, yeah, but I didn't have any intentions to actually do a show. I just didn't want to be fat anymore.
But like that's also a good point though. And like, you were actually not taking care of yourself, but you were powerlifting, you were doing things, right? And like a lot of people, they go like, oh, I want to see the 90-day transformation for myself that I see on Instagram. It's like, look, you haven't been doing any exercise. You've been drinking and eating like shit all the time. Like, you cannot expect something to happen overnight. You've got to put in time and effort, and it's going to take longer than you think. You actually need to prepare for that too, because you're like, oh, I probably have like 10 pounds to lose. You're like, yeah, you have about 25, 30 pounds to lose.
Yeah, if somebody thinks they have 15 pounds to lose, it means they have 40. If somebody thinks they're going to be shredded 30 pounds, it means they got about 70 to lose. And that's generally the case, right? Like, in order to go from where I was to actually legitimately being shredded, yeah, that was give or take something to the effect of like 60 or 70 pounds.
And there you go.
But if you'd ask guys then, like, if I needed to lose, or even me, it's like I actually hired a coach for a short while just to keep me accountable. And no matter how lean I got, he would tell me on every check-in, you're still a fat ass. No matter how lean I got, So like when I hit I was in the high 230s and had ab veins, and he's like, "You're still fat," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like I literally have ab veins." He's like, "You're still fat." He's like, "You're probably going to need to get down to about 198." If he would have been in person at that time, I would have punched him in his mouth. I remember he told me later, because I love the guy to death. Yeah. He told me, he said, "I stayed on you like that because I really wanted you to see that process through." But trust me, it worked, because when I was 238 and had ab veins and like I could see some glutes actually starting to come through, and he's like, "You're still a fat ass." Dude, I'm telling you, if I could have thrown him off a bridge into crocodile-infested waters, it would have happened right then and there. But, it worked, because I was like, "Dude, I'm going to get shredded." He's like, "You'll need to be 195 to be shredded." I'm like, when I was 17 years old, I was 195. What are you talking about? So, yeah, but it worked. But it was a lot of work. And most guys that think, I hear this a lot. Guys are like, "Well, I got 2 upper abs." I'm like, "Okay, dude, you're fat."
Yeah.
Just because you have 2 upper abs when you're severely dehydrated in the morning does not mean you're 20 pounds away from being shredded. Okay, you're not.
Yeah.
And that's the other misconception guys need to come to terms with. Most guys, here's the thing. This is the big thing. You're not packing as much muscle as you think you are. That is something I'm trying to get across. You are not packing as much muscle as you think you are. And the way a lot of guys, if they carry fat, their fat distribution is kind of even, all over their body. They'll be big kind of, everywhere. So they look proportionate. So they don't get, it's going to take a long time for all that fat to come off to actually be legitimately lean, and how much fat is really on them. Because they'll be like, "Well, I got some arm veins." I'm like, "Okay, but your lower back and your ass is mega fat." And that's gonna come off less. You don't how fat you are. So I got how fat I was. When I was 290 pounds, I knew I was an absolute enormous, giant fat body. There was no misgivings about that. It's just when I remember hitting 250 and I didn't feel fat anymore, and I'm wearing 34 jeans, and Trevor's still going, "No, every check-in, you're a total fat ass." I remember, dude, how lean do I have to get? But yeah, at that point, I was 20 pounds off from being legitimately shredded.
But I think it's a good point too. You said that having, you said you hired him as a coach, but having someone there to support you along the way, even if it's just a friend or someone to be there, just be like, "Hey, keep on with it," because it can be a tough journey to go on this thing alone too.
Dude, and what's funny is how simple it was. We were talking about earlier about counting calories and food sources and get crazy. My diet, the diet that Trevor gave me at that time, I said, "Dude, just keep it simple and tell me." And it was literally, we call it the chicken and peanuts diet. So it was some egg whites and a few whole eggs in the morning, and I think I had some asparagus, and the rest of the day it was chicken and servings of peanuts. That was my diet, for a long time, and I recomped really well on that because I could just do it. I'm one of those guys, I can eat the same food day after day after day after day after day, and I don't have a problem. I don't do that "Oh, I've been eating chicken for I don't care. I ate the same foods for years.
Yeah.
I'm not, and then if I want to binge or have a treat or whatever, sure, I'll have what I want to, but I'm not one of those people who needs this wide variety of foods. That's probably an advantage in some kind of way, I suppose. But yeah, Trevor gave me the chicken and peanuts diet. There's going to be a bunch of people listening to this, and they'll be trying to figure out how to eat chicken and peanuts to get shredded.
Yeah. It'll be the same thing. How much protein do I need for chicken? How much peanuts do I have? It's just fucking eat chicken and peanuts.
Well, you got to be careful with the peanuts because they pack calories. But that was my fat source. But there's some good carbs. And we loaded up heavily everything on sodium, and sodium will keep you filled out, and it's a nutrient transporter, so it will keep your muscles pretty filled out. So I didn't need a lot of carbs. We went super heavy on the sodium, and I remember telling Trevor, even as I was coming down fast, I'm not really flat. I'm pretty full, and it's the sodium. We were just really maxing out the sodium, right. And training was smashed. I was absolutely smashed training. What's funny is I hit a deadlift rep PR coming down in my recomp when I was 240. I did, I think it was 585 for a set of 8, I believe. And I think even I wasn't a great puller for reps. So when I pulled 705 for a double, my best at 635 was just a triple. And I pulled 725 later. And at that time, I would consistently pull 585 for like sets of 5 or 6. And I pulled 585 for a set of 8 when I was actually recomped and weighed like 30 or 40 pounds less than that. But the sodium was like off the charts. But it was chicken and peanuts. 8 ounces of chicken. I could look it up still. It's 8 ounces of chicken, and it was like so many peanuts. And it's like that was I had that 4 times a day. That was one of my diets. And then the other meal was my breakfast, which would be he tried to give me chicken and peanuts. I was like, okay, I can do the chicken and peanuts like 4 times a day, but I'm not doing it every freaking meal. Like I got one meal that's slightly different. So we actually made it was like eggs and whole eggs and some asparagus. And then the rest of the day was just chicken and peanuts. Like, and then people will understand, like, literally, if you just divvy down, and as I started needing to lose more fat, we took more peanuts away. It was that simple, dude.
Yeah.
We just took more peanuts away.
And I think it's one key point thing you said too. Like, you eat the same type of food, but it's like try and have this variety of everything, because like having also like if you're like I'm gonna have this on Monday, this on Tuesday, this on Wednesday, trying to prepare that. Like no wonder people don't want to fucking meal prep. It's because like do you really want to spend 2 or 3 hours prepping all that when instead you could just cook up a whole bunch of chicken and a couple
right?
of
Okay, then you can get your crock pot out, throw in a ton of chicken breasts. Like, and then cut it up from there, or shred it. And then you buy a couple of big things of peanuts. You get some eggs and some whole eggs. Like, and if you really, like, just want to say, if you can really do that, then there you go. You divvy out. It was like 7 to 8 ounces of chicken a meal, 3 to 4 times a day. I think it was 4 times a day. So many peanuts. Figure out your macros. Just think about how easy that would be. You're figuring out your macros based on peanuts, chicken, and eggs. Because I don't count vegetables. I don't count vegetables.
Yep.
That's what I did. That's how that's the diet I recomped on from 290. And I remember I was about 240 when I made the change.
Wow.
So I got that lean. I got like that lean where I had lower ab veins using that diet for that long.
There you go. Chicken and peanut diet. I'm going to make sure we are.
Chicken. You know what? That would be a good title for the podcast when we put up the Paul talks about the chicken and peanut diet, dude.
For sure, man. That'll be great. Now, Paul, I'm going to have to bring you on for a round 2 because I really want to keep going, but I am going to have to run. So before we go, can you please tell us more about where people can find you at the moment?
If you type in Lift Run Bang in the Google machine, you'll find me everywhere. For the most part. But right now, currently, I'm doing a lot of work for T Nation. I'm doing work for bodybuilding.com too. I'm probably going to have some stuff coming up after the first of the year with potentially my buddy Eugene, T.O., Scott Stevenson, and then Christian Thibodeau. So I've got a lot of talks in for like 2019. You have some stuff to do. Yeah, me and you. Yeah, that's right. Eugene is a fellow Aussie. So
yeah. Yeah,
Eugene and I we have some stories together.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Eugene and I have some stories together. Yeah, he's my homie, man. I love that guy like my brother. Yeah, he's the man. I love Eugene.
Yeah, he's great.
And we're supposed to potentially talk about doing some dates together for teaching.
That's awesome, man. I'm actually just listening to him on a podcast at the moment as we were speaking, actually. He's on one of the other Aussie guys' podcasts, so he's just a wealth of knowledge, that guy, hey?
Oh, absolutely, dude. And what's funny is I've known Eugene, I think, for maybe like the last 5 years. And what I've always loved about Eugene is the way he approached. That's the guy he was going to. It's been really cool to watch this, everything unfold for him because he was like, that was the guy he was going to become. He was just like a sponge. He just read and soaked up everything available. And it's just, dude, I love that guy to death. And he's like one of the hardest workers I know. So I have nothing but just mega mass amount of love and admiration for him.
Oh, man, that's bloody awesome. Paul, thank you so much again for coming on, mate. I really appreciate it. I'm going to have to get you on for round 2 because this is an awesome podcast.
All right, man. Anytime, just holler at me, and I'll meet you back on, and we'll go. Usually, when somebody has me on, they always want to discuss life and relationships. So talking about training has been kind of different.
Well, I haven't got any relationships at the moment, so I don't need to be talking about that stuff at the moment.
That's all good, man. Maybe for that, when you have me on round 2, you'll just be dating and be like, man, help me out and throw me out some fictional scenarios that really are about your life. And you'd be like, asking for a friend.
That's what it'll be. All right, thanks, mate. I really appreciate it, and I'll speak to you soon, okay?
All right, brother. God bless you, man. Have a good one.
Cheers. Hey, Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. So now you've listened all the way to the end. That means you get some free goodies. So what you can do is you've got two different options, or you can take them both. I've got an intermittent fasting cheat sheet and a high protein 20 recipe meal guide designed specifically for you in your situation. These meal plans and this intermittent fasting guide are designed to help you burn stubborn belly fat and get in the best shape of your life. So all you have to do is go to the show notes, click on the download link, and they'll get sent straight to your email address. It's as simple as that. They're completely free. They're going to help you transform your body. So go to the show notes now and download your free guides, and I'll speak to you in the next episode.